My pleasure today to introduce someone we all know, Steve Bunker. Steve's, as you know, just finished his first session with the state legislature, and I know we're all looking forward to hearing about that experience. But this isn't where it turns out that Steve's been involved in serving our community for many, many years, and I thought I'd tell you a little bit about that. Steve's called Farmington his home since his family moved here in 1965. He graduated from the Farmington High School class of 1967. Following 3 years in the U.S. Army, he later completed community college at University of Maine with a master's in adult education. He later joined the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve, serving an additional 23 years, retiring as a lieutenant commander. He spent several years on the Farmington Police Department, later working as staff at the Police Academy. He also worked for the county sheriff as a deputy corrections officer and dispatcher. He later joined the Maine Department of Public Safety to manage the statewide uniform crime reporting system. He was later selected as Maine's first state 911 director, where he helped implement our 911 dueling system, retiring after 30 years state service. Here at home, he completed 37 years as selectman and continues to serve in the fire department in his 47th year. He is a member of our American Legion post and proudly carries the American flag in the color guard. He is happily married to his first wife, Cheryl, who is a 50-year employee of Franklin Memorial Hospital. He is currently in recovery as a freshman member of the State House of Representatives, District 75, Farmington and Chesterville, and a 5-year cancer survivor. Please help me in welcoming Steve.
Thank you, Buzz. I appreciate that. I'll give you those $2 I promised for that introduction. And the one thing that I hate is computers. I'm going to see if this works.
Good so far.
What do we got going on
Oh,
here?
I know, hang on.
There you go.
I'm lucky at the Capitol I have an assistant that does all this stuff for me. Actually makes me look good. Thank you for having me here, and I'll do my best to stay on time. It's strange for so many people I know and enjoy here as members that I would be more wound up about my presentation today. I would rather be presenting in front of total strangers, probably because some of you know a lot more about me than you should. And I've been driving my wife crazy since I volunteered for this. She asking me, why can't I keep my head out of my computer? And I say, oh gosh, here's one more thing, knowing that I have to stay within 15 minutes or so to be in here. And it's been a real learning experience for me. I pride myself in thinking that I've always been a good student. But I'll have to say the last 8 months, I have learned more about the process of governance than I ever thought I could be, and I'm still in recovery on that. For freshman legislators, we spend many days prior to the session going through freshman orientation, and we all receive the legislator's handbook, which is the how-tos of everything that you could possibly think of, and there are written quizzes after every session that is there. The good thing about the process itself, unlike dictatorships where decisions are made from the top and they happen fairly quickly, ours is a very public, open process itself, and because of that it takes a lot of time. But it is very transparent, and the first page of the handout that I share with you, I always try to share this when I talk to folks, how the legislative process works. And I thought I knew a great deal about that, having been an elected official and gone to testify in Augusta or on many different bills over many decades themselves. I understood what it was like on that side in the peanut gallery, but when you're on this side of the podium itself, going from a concept where we come out with just an idea, working it through a drafting process itself to get into a legal form, finding sponsors itself to get it put into official consideration, getting it through a committee of jurisdiction, and I'll show you in a minute, there are 15 different separate committees that the legislature is spread out into, where you are assigned by a specific topic or area of interest that gets that first review. And here's where we take testimony for or against, or neither for or against, members of the public or other interested parties. And the first vote itself in consideration of that bill comes from a committee, and that gets some form of endorsement. Then it gets out onto the big floor in the House of Representatives and or the Senate, depending upon whether or not the sponsor was a representative or a senator. It would start on one side or the other. Have a consideration, amendments applied to it itself, endorsements made here or there. If in fact it is received well, either by the House or Senate, it is engrossed, the bill number is actually put on it, and it goes forward publicly, then is passed over to the Senate for their consideration into the other chamber, if it will. Senatorial legislation can start there and then come over to the House for their considerations. And then a further debate starts. There may be amendments that comes from one House may accept it, the other one may decline it, and there may be a back and forth a couple of times. There may be a reconsideration in a small subcommittee of both House and Senate put together to see if they can put together a compromise issue and bring it back forward for further consideration itself. Once it is approved by both houses, at least as a majority vote itself, then it becomes law itself. Depending upon its enactment, unless it's an emergency session, it happens 90 days after the closing date of the legislature to be enacted, unless it's of an emergency provision, which requires that bill in both the House and the Senate to have an emergency vote in order for it to be enacted immediately. And that's a pretty high benchmark to come forward on. Then finally, our governor has an opportunity to either accept that bill and actually endorse it to make it official, or she can wait and allow that time period to happen, and it becomes automatically without his or her signature in this instance, or she can veto any particular given bill, even though it's been passed by both the House and Senate. That bill comes back to the House and Senate, and we must have a special vote to override her veto of that in order for it to be enacted. And it was quite a list, Patty, if you correct me if I'm wrong, at least 30 different bills, at least the governor's office had to have consideration. Some vetoed, some she didn't particularly like, but stood back and allowed it to be passed in the proper time frame. Others she signed immediately in that process themselves. I've been a proponent of having in every high school at least some form of governance as a part of their rules of study in high school itself. I can remember having civic lessons in high school, both and in college also. Too little time is spent on that in my personal view of themselves. And state government is not the only one that we need to have a better grasp of. One of my most enjoyable times of my years on this select board themselves, and I still miss it. And I look forward to Randy working his way through that process, and I hope he feels the same way that I do. I've always been of a mind that the governance that governs the closest to the people is the most effective itself, and that's the folks at the local level. It's taken a time for me to be used to being had one step back from that in dealing things from a state statute. I cannot imagine what it's like being a member of Congress when you're even more distance from the folks that sent us there to govern itself. But there are rare occasions as a legislator, as frustrating it has been in the process themselves, that I can be a part of a piece of legislation that actually affects citizens, particularly the folks that I know and love back home, that makes a difference itself. I was more than a bit of an oddball and still am in the legislative process. Here I am, having grown up in a family and been a registered Republican forever, yet I come out of the dark woods and end up running as a Democrat, having been pulled out of retired service where I left the Board of Select Persons after 37 years. I was going to go searching for those golden years I've been hearing about, only to find that the incumbent, looking for his fourth term, right at primary, drops out of the race, and there's no second in command on that. And for better or for worse, my beloved governor invited me out of the blue to come to her kitchen table and just have a cup of coffee with her and just chat. And I found out after about an hour and a half that there was some extreme interest on her to have me step back forward and be into that process themselves. And I've been thrilled and absolutely humbled and honored to be in that process themselves. It's exciting on most every day, but it's the most frustrating process that I have ever been through. And I'll try to make my comments this morning as I watch my clock to make sure that I'm nonpartisan as best I can, because that's the approach that I have taken towards government themselves. If the bill, regardless if it's supported by a D or an R or an independent, I look back to my constituents to see if it's best for them. And for more than one case, I've taken a left-hand turn and not voted the party line on a particular bill because my conscience, my ethics, and my response from constituents back here at the home front tell me to vote otherwise. And that's the way the process has been. And I have irritated both sides of the table from time to time, depending on how my vote has gone on that. You'll see my business card at the bottom of the first page of that handout. I'll have to tell you, I hear from too few members of the public as it relates to legislation at the state level themselves. I've got a short list of people, or about 5, that call me every week, sometimes multiple times during the day. But for the majority of folks, they don't reach out to me. And that makes it tough for me when a bill becomes before me in the House to figure out what my process should be and where my heart and my vote should be on issues as they are. So I always ask for you to look to me. You know me here in the community. I'm in my phone book. I still have a regular hard copper wired phone number, but you've got my email address and my cell phone. And I need to know that process themselves as it goes, as we go through that process. The good news about the legislature, we had over 2,000 pieces of legislation come before us. It was like drinking from a proverbial fire hydrant as it comes in for that many topics. And the process gets pushed very fast from a bill draft to an LD number to a committee to get the committee reviews, have the public comment, get them out on the floor, votes, appeals go back and forth, and amendments and whatnot. And the message is, we're out of session by June. You've got to get these things through and work, and get your votes out onto the floor themselves. It's a tough way to make good public policy, I'll have to say. But the legislators, we do that to ourselves. We can put in unlimited numbers of bills that either I have thought of, the governor may have thought of, a state government department or bureau would like a bill sponsored on behalf of them, and general members of the public. And we end up overwhelming ourselves with the amount of work that comes through. There's been discussions in the past that perhaps we should have a rule in the House and Senate that each member of the legislature is authorized only X number of bills to sponsor to come before this, and narrow that process down. That's been hotly debated back and forth, and some would say that's a great way to limit the number and focus particularly on those that have highest priority. Others would say you're taking away my rights as an elected person to bring forth any legislation that comes to me that I would like to come out onto the floor. So thus far, we've not limited ourselves on that. We closed last session and actually passed into law about 600 pieces of legislation that would be enacted either at time of closure or within 90 days of closure. And there are already over 400 pieces of legislation that were in the log jam and were held over last session that are just waiting for me to arrive in Augusta when December comes, in addition to all the new ideas that will come up in the process themselves. So it's a very hurried, but I'll have to say a very transparent process to make those issues work. Now I'm going to embarrass myself and see if I can get to the internet. Here's one more step, and then I'm going to talk about the second page here, if I can get this to come up. There is a place on the internet itself that is a great website. Thank you very much. That talks about the Maine State Legislature and is a great resource for anybody that wants to know how the heck does that process work. Looking at the top left, if you want to know the activities of the Senate and who your senator is, for many of us it's Russell Black, finishing out his last term, he is termed out, or members of the House, you want to know what those House folks are all about, how many of us there are, how many are Ds, how many are Rs. You can also get a live video stream anytime the House is in session. You can actually watch that process. It is maybe nauseous to some people, but it is a legislative process that's open to the public. You can do the same thing for a live video when the Senate is in session also, which is good to know. And if you're not sure who your folks are, you can do a lookup on folks and find out who your representative is. Oh, I've got to put in my street name? Oh my God. Anyways, I'm in there. Unless the legislative leadership has asked me to depart. And by gosh, you know what I love about this? Anyways, I promise. Anyways, the process that I like most about in the legislature, there are 15 different legislative committees, and every legislator gets assigned to at least one committee where I think the real housework is done on any bills that come in. Testimony is taken from members of the public, and our first vote, yay or nay, on that comes up. I was lucky, I think. I got selected to 2 legislative committees, which was great news. I was elected for the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, which is my background. I was great to have that. And they have an individual website. You can see on the left-hand side who the members are. Oh my God, I still am there. It scared me for a minute that I'd been eliminated. When in fact they're in session, you can click up here and you can see what's on the calendar, what we're going to be talking about, and when testimony would be taken. All of those bills are there in public, so if you're tracking those, you can see when and where, that you can either come to Augusta, testify in person, or send testimony in written form, or from the works in COVID, we now have everything live video, so you can live stream your way in, and we have very large TV screens that you can actually come in, is about as close as being there in person and offer your testimony and observe everybody else's testimony and see everybody else's written documents that are there. A very transparent process themselves. The other committee that I was on that came as a bit of surprise to me is the Agricultural, Conservation, and Forestry Committee. And that was my number 3 choice. Freshmen get 3 different choices. I got number 1 and number 3. My second one was Veterans Affairs. Didn't make it on that one, but came up on agriculture, conservation, and forestry. And I mentioned to my fellow committee members there, not only am I a freshman learning the process, I'm neither a forester or a farmer, but by gosh, all my neighbors are. So to be able to help them and work with them and learn what their process is was an absolute blessing on that, but a huge learning curve. Agricultural and conservation groups and forestries are huge organizations with many departments and bureaus and programs and staff that have certain specialties that work out around the program themselves. And being in an agrarian society, if you will, most people have forgotten the fact that vegetables don't come from Hannaford's or Shop and Save. There are actually farmers out there that are growing those themselves. And Maine still has its forest products as a renewable resource that needs strong management and guidance and protection. So our forestry folks, such as the work done by Patty on a regular basis there in protecting and nurturing our forest lands and whatnot, is a huge program themselves. Wildfires being only one of those many issues themselves that are out there. So those are two great committees. And you talk about learning curve. If you think I'm supposed to be a resident expert on 2,000 pieces of legislation that comes before the session, I've got all I can do to focus on the two areas that bills come in on those two particular products. Those I can generally speak to, or I know somebody who does know the right answer to it. But understandably, the general public expects that when they call up their legislature and want to know about motor vehicle registrations in the Secretary's of State office, I've got an issue with that. That's not in my bailiwick on that one, but by gosh, I know I can call somebody to find the answer out on that. And that's the enjoyable part of being a legislator, is being an advocate for members of the public. If you have a challenge with or are not satisfied with levels of state service or have a question that's not answered, give the legislator a call. We're the intermediary on that. I've been pleased to find out that I can call most commissioner of the Department of, name it. They'll typically answer my phone and actually get back to me and find out the answer to the question that would come up. So being an advocate for members of the public is probably the most enjoyable part of my legislative process themselves. All kinds of additional resources that are on there and in there for people to know and understand how the process works themselves. When the legislature is in process themselves, there isn't any there right now. I'm sorry, this is a little bit boring, but you can see the calendar for the day. We get a printed and electronic calendar for all legislators on when the House or Senate is going to be in session. Then you can go to that session and see which bills are particularly going to be heard. Or it also tells us which committee is in session. Luckily for me, my week filled out pretty quick because public safety meets Mondays and Wednesdays. Guess what conservation meets? Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that leaves me Fridays for additional work and constituency work back and forth there. So you can find a topic in there of your choosing, find out where it is. You need to be a part of the process. If you're not pleased with how government works well, which I'm not from time to time, you need to get yourself in there and speak to somebody like myself. You may not have the time, because many of you are very busy in your personal and private lives, to drive to Augusta and sit for hours in testimony, but you can get in there and see it by remote. You can offer written testimony. You can zoom in and offer testimony live stream and make that process work for itself for better or worse on that. Let me go real quick for the second page, because I see I'm already going to be running out of time. Real quick. On the back of this, I put down some highlights on the things that I think the legislature at the end actually completed. I was told by senior legislators that I served with, nobody is ever happy when a balanced budget actually comes out. There's something you wish you would have done more of. There's some things that you missed. There's some things you wish you hadn't done on that. I would have to say, trying to be as nonpartisan as I can, if you will, on that. We did accomplish a few things that are influenced here back home. For instance, we were able to hold on to 5% of revenue sharing that comes back to cities and towns to help balance our budgets and take some of the weight off from taxpayers. We're able to continue 55% school funding from the state, again, to help with our local budget processes themselves. free tuition for community college students themselves, paid family medical leave, breakfast and lunches for K through 12 students were all good issues. We started to pay up some of our missing funds that we owed our hospitals for main care services to patients that they had already provided for and were already years behind that process. We're starting to catch back up with those hospitals who are bleeding red on that. Last thing's coming up. Main care is the big bully in the room itself. It eats up our budget. It is huge and it grows exponentially throughout the years themselves, and we don't have a real good solution to it, but it really pushes our budget itself. 1 out of every 4 citizens in Maine, their health care is Maine Care. 1 out of every 3 students, their health care is covered by Maine Care. I don't know how we're going to do without it, but we're left to try to work with those issues. And I close by saying this. As a private citizen, I can choose not to be involved in any of the more controversial programs and projects or issues that faces the public themselves. When you're elected official, every vote that I take in committee, every vote on the House floor themselves is a public record. So you can't dodge things like right to life versus women's right to choose, gun control, PFAS, things of that nature, voter ID, the red flag law. Those are the tough ones that are on my homework assignment. But I'm willing to stay there and work for you as best I can. And I have that feeling my time is already lapsed. My time is your time. Please stay in touch with me. It's been both a pleasure and an interesting life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Do you have anything for me?
Any questions for Steve?
I'll hang around afterwards. I am handsomely rewarded for this kind of work. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the stress of seeing that coming up.
Well, I'm still in recovery.
And you get the speaker bag.
For me, you shouldn't have.
I think I should have. And certificate thanking you. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much.